Hello and welcome to Schools Not Out, your daily classroom for CSEC and CAVE students. So today we are going to be looking at something very interesting. We are going to be focusing on the Cape Caribbean Studies SBA. Now I can hear you in your living rooms going, yay, yay, because in fact the Cape Caribbean Studies SBA is a headache for many students. So believe me when I say that I understand why you are feeling so good about today's lesson. So we are going to just be communicating the objectives for today. For today, we are going to briefly outline the requirements of the subject as it relates to the SBA. We are going to examine some of the challenges that you face, some of those troubled areas, the areas that carry the most marks, that you don't get those marks, yes. We are also going to offer workable solutions to overcome some of these challenges. And the ultimate aim is to improve your pass rate, right? So we want to move you from your 3s and 2s into a 1, into a distinction. That's the aim, all right? So we know that Caribbean Studies is a multidisciplinary subject. So it draws on a wide range of different areas of Caribbean society and culture and life and development. And the SBA is no exception. Because how you will choose your problem statement, it can come from any area of Caribbean life, all right? We also know that it covers these areas: sports, gender, education, family, media, religion, environmentalism, technology, health, crime, globalization, culture. The list is endless. And you are able to choose your SBA, your problem statement, from any of these areas. So what is it that interests you? That should be the first question. All right. So the research component is really based on module 3 of the syllabus. All of what is contained in the research area of module 3, that is what you are executing in doing your SBA. All right. So as we say, what interests you? What is it that you want to do as an individual? Right? Are you an athlete? Does sports interest you? Are you concerned about women's rights and those kinds of things? Maybe you want to look at gender. Are you a lover of culture like myself? Then perhaps you want to go to look at something related to culture, religion, you name it, then you can choose your SBA topic from any of those areas under Caribbean Studies. So what are the requirements? Let's look a little bit more at the requirements, because the requirements tell you what to do. If you are not quite aware of what they are, then you will not know what to do and you can't maximize those points, right? So this research paper contributes to 40% of the final grade. Yes, you heard me right. 40% of the final grade, right? This is unheard of for most other subjects. So what that means is that if you are able to get somewhere between 50 to 60 out of 60, then you are well on your way to gaining that 40% before the exam even begins, as in before you sit down to write the exam. So that means you want to really do well in this SBA. It is crucial that you do well in this SBA. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, I have been forced to do this subject. I am a science person and I don't want to do this subject. I don't see the relevance of Caribbean Studies. I don't know why I have to do this subject. Well, it is what it is. You will have to do the subject because it is compulsory. But as I said, there is a good fallback plan for you because your SBA is 40%. So if you ever had an opportunity to do very well and to get a 1 in Cape, this is it. Trust me, this is it. All right? So you are expected now to look at the units from all of those areas that we spoke about. You're expected to see what you are interested in and then begin to, in your head, begin to formulate some kind of topic that you want to look at. Of course, you should be past this stage already. You should have done all of this already. Your teacher would have looked at your research proposal and would basically have signed off on your problem statement, and you should be well on your way. So I know that you're at home and this is the stage where you are trying to complete this SBA. More than likely your teacher has given you those corrections to do that final overall now. So you want to make sure that you are on the right track. But I'm still going to go from scratch with all of the areas. Maybe you want to look at what you have to see if you are following the rules exactly. All right, so it says that the paper should provide evidence of the candidate's mastery of the research skills as outlined in Module 3 in conducting investigations of problems or issues in Caribbean society. And of course, you should neatly type using Times New Roman font size 12, double spacing, yes, all of that. And of course, you should pay attention at this level to your referencing style, APA. All right? So you want to bear that in mind. Other requirements now. It should be 1,500 words in length. 1,500 words. All right? So it does not include the charts and the graphs and the footnotes and the references and appendices and, you know, those kinds of things that make up the entire SBA. It does not include all of that. It only includes 1,500 of your words. And can I just hasten to tell you that if you go over the word limit too much, then you are in fact penalized 10%. Yes, you are penalized for going over the word limit. Now let's get straight into it. The mark scheme, what does that look like? So you have introduction and purpose as the first thing, 5 marks. Your literature review, 8 marks. Data collection sources, 4 marks. Presentation of data, 8 marks. Analysis of data, 10 marks. You notice that the marks keep going up. The discussion of findings, 12 marks. Yes. The conclusions, limitations, and recommendations are 8 marks, broken down as 2, 2, 4. Conclusion, limitation, recommendations. Overall presentation, 2 marks, and your writing skills, 3 marks. All right, so that's what the mark scheme looks like. Let's look at the introduction. Now, the introduction is just 5 marks. However, there are 5 different things that you need to produce for your introduction, and each of them obviously is worth 1 mark. Let's look at the problem statement. Your problem statement or statement of the problem, same thing. It must be excellent, appropriate, and relevant. We'll go into that a little bit more, right? Your background to the problem is really a paragraph or so, very short paragraph, locating the community in which you are doing your study and giving a general idea of the observations that you have made, because you couldn't just take up and just do this problem if it's not a problem. It must have been a problem. You must have noticed something that caused you to want to research this topic, all right? What is the purpose of the study now? That's another 1 mark. What is it that you aim to do, aim to gain from looking at this? What is the educational value? No, the educational value is a little different from the purpose. The educational value means who will benefit from this? How will these people benefit from it? So which ministry? Say you're looking at garbage disposal in your community and, you know, all of that as your problem. Who will benefit from it? Is it NEPA, right? The relevant agencies. Is it the National Solid Waste Management Authority? Or, you know, which relevant agency or ministry is going to benefit? How are people going to benefit from this study? The educational value. And then the definition of key terms should be very straightforward. Let's zero in a little bit on the problem statement now. It must have certain variables. It must be relevant. It must be place specific. It must be profound and specific. Now, when I say place specific, it must be somewhere. So you must be placing it in a community. So it could be a school community. It could be your community where you live, and you have to state the community in the actual problem statement. All right? It must be profound. In other words, it should not be simplistic and reading at the CSEC level. No, it must be reading at the CAPE level. So when you make the statement, it should jump out at somebody to say yes, right? It must be relevant. What do we mean by relevant? Current, you know, being talked about now. you don't, the thing about Caribbean studies is that it's current affairs, things that are happening now in Caribbean society, right? So you need to look at something that is current, that is trending, that is a problem, that's causing an issue within the community within which you are locating it. All right. Now, the general idea with the problem statement, let's go back to that a little bit, is that one, you should seek to look at two different variables, right? And then have a look at how these variables are impacting on each other. So you want to look at a kind of cause and effect kind of scenario. And you don't have to say cause, or how does poverty cause that? No, you don't need to say it like that, but it should have that cause and effect kind of, thing going on, right? So two different variables. For example, I just give you an example here, but there are many others here. For example, an investigation into how the prevalence of father absenteeism in the community of X impacts on the relationship between boys and involvement in gangs. I just made that up out of my head. And see, there are two different variables there. You're looking at crime as a totally different issue, and you're looking at issues to do with the family. So it's two different variables you're putting together, and you're looking at how they are impacting on each other, and you want to be creative with this. So here are some other examples, and these are very, very, very relevant. An investigation into the effects of the state of emergency on small businesses in the community of X in St. Catherine. That's current. An investigation into the infrastructural development in the of 3 miles St. Andrew and the extent to which this has resulted in increased respiratory diseases in the community of X. So there you have it. You have development happening, impacting on health right there. Two different variables from the first one. Another one, an investigation into the extent to which a lack of funding of the sports program at X school has resulted in an underperformance of student athletes. So you see, these are things that you want to look at. You want to be creative with your problem statement. Now, it is important to note that a research paper with a problem statement that is not developed properly is hardly likely to receive a good grade in the rest of the SBA. So if you don't get it good from the get-go, something is going to be wrong going forward. You will not receive the maximum marks. So moving on quickly from the problem statement now into the literature review, a troubled area. And many students do not do this area very well. It's worth 8 marks, right? What is it? It is a review of the relevant literature on the topic that you're looking at. It is not merely a summary, right? But it is actually a review, which means that you are looking at sources and extracting information that is going to be relevant to what you are doing. No, it does not mean that all of this information must agree with what you have in your mind. It could contrast, right? So there's some of your, and it's actually very good to have your sources being contrasted in that kind of way, right? So somebody is agreeing with a particular issue, but another source is disagreeing and looking at it from a different point of view, all right? So the sources, though, must be varied. Now, I must tell you that when the examiner gets your SBA, first thing that they're going to look at is your bibliography to determine, or your reference page, to determine whether or not you have a variety in the sources. And this is very important. If you do not have the variety, no matter how well you write the literature review, you will not gain the maximum marks. That's very important. All right? So you want to have a variety, a mixture, a journal article, a book, an official study, a newspaper article, an official website like UN, WHO, PAHO, some kind of official website like that. Starting in Jamaica is always a good place to go for several of the topics that you may come up with, right? So you want to have that mixture, and it's 4 or more sources, 4 or more. So if you only have 4, then ensure that you have 4 in terms of the mix there. In other words, do not place several books, 4 books, because you will not receive the marks that you need. Another thing that I need to point out here is that you must also look at the regions, right? So you want to have something local, something regional, and something a little bit farther, all right? So pay attention to those things in terms of writing your literature review, all right? You are to use the APA citation style, and there are some examples here of how that is done. And if we have time at the end, then we can go back to looking at some of that. But we need to move on now to the data collection sources. It is a discussion about both the primary and the secondary sources that should be done here. What do you look at with the primary source? The primary source is what you are going to be doing now, your research. All right, so you look at the sampling method. What is it? Probability, non-probability. What sampling method is it? It looks at the sample, size, geography, all of those things. Describe your sample. The instrument, which more than likely would be your questionnaire, describe it. State the properties, the advantages and disadvantages. Right? The research process. When did you hand out the questionnaires? How many did you hand out and collect? And so on and so forth. Right? And then your secondary sources now, you would look at the variety and importance. And I mean the sources you have already used in your literature review. That's what we're talking about when we talk about your secondary sources. Describe them. Talk about the same variety that you have used. How will this be beneficial to what you are looking at? All right? Talk about the jurisdictions, the various jurisdictions, the local, the regional, the international. How do they compare, and how will this enhance your research? That's what you really want to do with your data collection sources. All right? So you would develop your questionnaire from that, right? And please note that your questionnaire must be developed a specific way. As much as possible, avoid open-ended questions. You may place one at the end, but you would certainly not represent this one, because that kind of data is hard to collate and to put together at this level, right? So you want to have somewhere about 15, 16 questions, right? You want to hand out and have to collate somewhere about maybe 20 questionnaires to collate to do your presentation of data. That's what you want to have. So you may want to hand out 25 just in case you don't get back all of them or something like that, right? And you want to ensure that your questionnaire is done well, right? Give the persons you are handing the questionnaires to, give them options. Anticipate what some of these options could be and place them there. Use superlatives like most and main and that kind of thing, because the superlatives will help you to receive one response, right? So you don't have a lot of things to try to collate there. Ensure that you are doing that in order to have, and use levels, rarely, often, that kind of thing, every day, twice per week, that kind of thing. That's what you want to use, levels. So your presentation of data now, you are going to be choosing from those 15 questions or 16 questions or so. You are going to be choosing somewhere about 6 of those questions to now present. So you are not going to be presenting by writing back the question, right? You are going to come up with titles that are formed from the questions that you have placed on your questionnaire. All right, and you're going to be presenting those. Now, please note that they must be varied. First thing that we're going to look for is the variation, right? So, important point, I have it here in red. Pie charts, bar graphs, line graphs, which, by the way, are not appropriate for this kind of study because line graphs give you information over time. All of those are considered to be graphs. So they are only one way of representing. Yes, I can hear you sighing and I can hear you saying, oh my gosh, yes, it's true, right? So if you have bar graphs and pie charts and all of those things, they are only one way. Other ways that you can use: concept maps, tables, text. So you just draw a text box and write the information down, and it's a text box, right? Venn diagrams can also be used, right, to represent your data. So there you have it, 4 different ways. 4 different ways. All right, so that's your presentation of data, essentially. So we are getting to the part now where you need to be using your brain a little bit more. You remember that brain right there? The bulbs should be going off, because a lot of what you have done so far may be mindless activity for you. But now you really need to dig deep and begin to think in order to do the next parts, these parts that are coming up. And these are the parts that we end up having a lot of problems that you don't normally do well on. So the analysis of data. What is it? It is an intelligent, clear, and precise explanation of the results of the research. Notice those adjectives: intelligent, clear, and precise explanation. All right? You are looking for, what are you looking for here? You're looking for trends in the data. You're looking for patterns. You are looking for whether or not the data is consistent. Is it as expected, as one would expect? So students, let me just break it down for you a little bit more. You are going to be taking, after you have collated the data, brought together all of your questionnaires, you've looked at all of your questions, and you're going to take a blank page and you're going to write down for each question what is it that each person says about, the different things. So how many persons said yes? How many persons said no? By the way, limit those yes and no questions on the questionnaire. How many persons said this? How many persons said that? And you do that for each of the questions. When you have done that now, you're looking at the data on the page, and you want to look at what it is telling you, what it is saying, because you would have asked a wide range of questions, right? Ranging from causes to effect to, results, same thing as effect, to solutions. You would be asking those questions, throughout the questionnaire. So you want to look at that now on the page and determine what is it that you are seeing, right? You're looking for the things that are inconsistent, what we call anomalies, things that are unexpected. So you had this answer here. Most people said this for this question, but in this one, persons are saying something somewhat different and the information does not follow. That is what you call an anomaly. You are expected to point out these things. For the most part, the analysis is quantitative. So you're using back the numbers. No, you are to be writing in continuous prose here. You should not be writing down point 1, figure 2. You should not be doing that. You should be looking at and writing down in your paragraphs this information. Put down the data, explain what these trends and patterns and anomalies are that are coming out, and that is what your analysis is. All right, so the last thing we look at before we go to break is the discussion of findings, and this is a big problem. You are asked to present, for the most part, a qualitative discussion here. This means that you are expected to look at the data overall now and extract from the data 4 main findings, 4 main ideas that jump out at you, and ventilate these ideas while at the same time putting in the secondary sources that you already use in your literature review, saying whether or not these sources agree or disagree. You will recall Peel that we used last time. Peel can be used here for the discussion of findings. Make your point, which is the finding. Explain, give some more details. Example, in this case, would mean the sources and then your link, some kind of implication of this. So here is an example, quick example. The research has shown that the main challenge facing girls' schools is a lack of funding. And this is about funding for sports, right? That's just the point. Boys' schools traditionally have vibrant alumni. And it goes on to tell you, it puts in the sources. Brown 2011, however, notes that there's one other factor that is more important than the funding itself. And then at the bottom, the linking sentence, the implications of this is that eventually sporting programs for girls will continue to be of an inferior quality. So that's essentially what the discussion sounds like. I need to read this entire example so that students can clearly understand what it should sound like. So this would be just one paragraph, and you would have at least 3 more paragraphs sounding very similar to this. So as I said, you are extracting at least four main ideas that when you look at the data, this is what jumps out at you. So you're extracting these ideas and then you are ventilating these ideas and you are using the secondary sources in your lit review to assist you. So you're looking at whether or not these sources agreed, disagreed, the extent to which they agreed or disagreed, right, with what you have found out. So here's this example of just one paragraph. It says, and this is from a topic that is looking at the lack of funding for sporting activities amongst girls' schools. That's essentially what the investigation is. The research has shown that the main challenge facing girls' schools is a lack of funding. Boys' schools traditionally have vibrant alumni associations that supplement the income of the school and its ability to successfully implement extracurricular activities, especially sports. Girls' schools are sometimes at a disadvantage as it relates to this aspect. Here's where the source is coming now. So you have made your point, you have explained, and here you are putting in the sources, which in this case would be your example using Peel. Price 2009 agrees with this finding, noting the extensive capital that old boys invest in their alma mater. Brown 2011, however, notes that there is one other factor that is more important than the funding itself. Are you looking at how things are contrasting there? He contends that the conditioning of a mindset that believes that girls should be doing certain subjects and activities rather than others causes this problem. The implications of this, and this is the final now, the link, the implications of this is that eventually sporting programs for girls will continue to be of an inferior quality compared to the boys, denying female athletes an equal chance of maximizing potential. That is what one paragraph in the discussion of findings sounds like. So I hope that this is useful for you in looking at that, because I know that you have not yet gained those maximum marks. Remember, it's 12 marks. All right? So we're moving on now to the final aspects, the conclusions and limitations. So the conclusion is just one paragraph summing up the main ideas and points related to the research. Be careful that it is concise. You should not be giving too much details. No statistics are needed here. None of the data, the raw data is needed here. Just your words now summing up what you have found. Then your limitations. This is really explaining the legitimate, and note that word, legitimate challenges you encountered. So if the challenges you encountered were because of your own folly in handing out the questionnaires or something like that, then that is not a legitimate limitation. Your limitation should be legitimate, all right? Suppose it is that you found that there was a very small pool of available secondary sources. That's a legitimate challenge that you face, so you may want to put that there, all right? So the conclusions, 2 marks, limitations, 2 marks, all right? The recommendations now, another troubled area. You are expected to present at least 2 recommendations. So note, let me go again. The recommendations are 4 marks. It does not mean that you are to write 4 recommendations. 2 very well ventilated recommendations are good for what you need to do here, right? So you need to explain exactly how the recommendation will be implemented. And here's where the brain comes in again. You need to begin to think about what is it that you want to do. Remember now, at the beginning at the educational value, you said that you wanted this to be of some educational value to your country. So how is this going to be done? What are your recommendations? Which agency of the government or community group will implement it? How will the project be funded? Who will benefit from such a program? So you may suggest 2 different kinds of recommendations. One could be at the local level within the community, right? And the other could be from the national level, from the government. Do you want laws to be put in place, right? Are there laws, but you need this law to be strengthened? Is that what you need? Look at existing programs, right? And see whether or not there are programs that are there that look at what you really want to do, what you want to recommend. If there is, strengthen that program. If there isn't, come up with a whole new program of your own. Name the program even. Say how the program will be done, right? So you have programs like PATH, and that's PATHE, no user fee policy in schools and hospitals. These are programs that already exist. So if you're looking at something within that band, you may want to look at these programs and determine whether or not these programs cover your recommendations. All right? So recommendations then seek to answer all of these questions. What exactly is it that you're recommending? Don't be shy, be very specific about the program. So is it that you would like a community program, right? And what exactly is the program that you want? Is it that you want a community parenting program? When do you want this program? So say when this program is to be done. Is it going to be held every Monday evening at 7 p.m. at the community center? So that's where now. Where is it going to be done? How is it going to be done? And who is going to do it? Right? Is it going to be the Social Development Commission who is going to be responsible for these parenting programs? Is it going to be the National Parenting Support Commission who should be responsible for this, coming in every Monday evening? Who are the persons who are going to be undertaking this training? Are you going to be asking, I don't know, teachers who are trained in guidance counselors? Is that what you want? So you need to begin to think about what exactly you want in terms of the recommendations, right? And another thing, as I said, I cannot emphasize enough, be very specific, right? And have some idea about what you really want. So, for example, you are saying that, let us go back to the question that we used at first, the investigation about the link between absenteeism of fathers and it's resulting in boys going into gang activities. Let's look at that one. On the national level, what could you suggest as a recommendation there? What could you suggest for the government to do there? You may want to think about it. Is it that there are laws, but you think that we should be strengthening these laws that are there? What exactly is the law? So you can go online and you can search for the existing law or laws that cover this area and determine what about the law needs to be strengthened. All right? Is it that you want fathers to be held more accountable in terms of they need to be there with their children, with their boys? Do you want a law to be implemented to say that they must be there? I don't know. It cannot be ridiculous, of course. It must be realistic, but at the same time, it must show that you are doing some level of thinking about the recommendations, right? Why do you want this to be done? What will it achieve? So again, you want to ensure that you are putting down two recommendations. One at the local level, in the community within which you have placed your research, and another perhaps at the national level, right? If you're looking at something to do with, I don't know, hurricanes or other kinds of natural hazards, you may want to look at a recommendation on a regional level as well. What is it that you perhaps want to suggest that SIDEMA does, right? What do you want to suggest that they do, right? Is it that, for example, we have a fund that the Caribbean countries contribute to, right, in case there is a natural disaster. And countries contribute to the fund every year. However, there's a threshold in terms of the level of damage that the country must reach in order to access this fund. Is it that you want to suggest that the threshold be lowered so that more countries can have access to this fund when they are in fact affected by natural disasters? Do you see how deep and how far you need to think? Yes. That's as far as you need to go. So begin to think about those recommendations much more than you have done, and you receive those 4 marks. It may just be 4 marks, but believe me when I tell you that those 4 marks are very hard to come by. All right, so the last thing now will be the overall presentation and writing skills. Presentation is 2 marks. The bibliography, appendices, page numbers, citation style, content page, all of these things are very important on the presentation, right? So you are doing a project. It's a research, but it has to be presented in project form. So you want to ensure you have all of those little things done pat. Even how you reference in the literature review and throughout is very important in terms of presentation. Is your bibliography or your reference page or your works cited page, any of those words, is that page done properly? Have you followed the guidelines? Now I invite you to go online and search how to do APA citation properly. Anything that you need is available online, go online and find out. And there are even some of the templates that actually do it for you, so you don't have to stress your head about how it is done. All right, and then the writing skills, 3 marks. Proper use of the English language. You need to be looking at your grammar, your spelling, your sentence construction. No, you should not be using bullet points. For areas such as the discussion of findings, the analysis of data, the literature review, and so on, you should not be using bullet points. You should be writing in continuous prose, right? You should not be using things like contractions. Your full stop should be where it's supposed to be, your commas, your capital letters. I cannot overemphasize these things, and many times students take these things for granted, but it should not be taken for granted, because in an SBA such as this, every single mark is very, very, very important for you to get. All right, now I want to just very quickly mention to you that you should be very careful of plagiarism. Do not lift other people's work and place it onto the page. When you're writing your literature review, for example, be very careful of how you write. You want to ensure that you are not taking somebody's work and passing it off as if it is your own. Now, students, we have looked at the entire SBA from start to finish, and we have ventilated some of those areas that I think are very troublesome. So now you just want to go, sit down, pay attention, and see if you can get those maximum marks, because it's 40% of your exam. So that's all today for Cape Caribbean Studies.